a clap. Great. Welcome, Jim and Lamone. And I'm gonna, like I said, Jim, I'm gonna try to make sure your video is the one that we're seeing here. Perfect. All right. Well, like I said, welcome Jim Wolf from the Elks for discussion on the Elks kind of journey through diversity, equity, inclusion. And I'm really excited that Jim was able to come and talk to us a little bit about the history of the Elks and what's happened over the last few years with the Elks. And, you know, Jim, if you could highlight some of the, you know, growth that's happened there as well, that would be great. But yeah, I'll kind of turn it over to you and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Keith and Lamone, for inviting me in the Denver Inter-Neighborhood Cooperation for this opportunity to speak to you. So just to kind of take you back a little bit. So I joined the Denver Elks Lodge about 8 years ago as a result of being invited there more of as a rental for our local middle school, Skinner Middle School, for a fundraiser. And while we were there, one of the long-term Elks who was acting as the bartender invited several of us to join and indicated that they were looking for some younger people to come in, some neighborhood people, and get involved. And at the time, I specifically told him I would never join the Elks Club. I was busy. I didn't have a history with family with Elks. I didn't know a lot about it. But then the more, my wife is very involved in our Highlands neighborhood and community organization, school fundraising. And so she indicated that, you know, this might be a good opportunity because the Elks Lodge in Denver has a lot of meeting space. And so when your wife tells you you're going to do something, next thing I know, I became an Elk member. But when I do something, I don't do it, you know, I'm usually 100%. So I did my research, background, and the Elks organization in Denver dates back to 1882. And it has a very strong foundation of charity, community organization, fundraising for different groups, the veterans, Colorado Special Olympics. And so I thought this is a great organization that could really be the foundation of a lot of the work that us neighborhood parents had been doing for the schools and our communities. But this is a national organization that has the same mission statements of what we've been trying to do in our community. And we could build upon that and actually bring it out to our community, but it also had meeting space. So it was a win-win. But as a result of that, what I started to do is go to every barbecue, every poker game that I was playing, every social thing. And I was inviting my guy friends to join. And about 2 years later, I had, between me and one of my good friends, Ben Delegowski, both he and I had brought in about 100 new members, all of which were men. And the more and more that I looked around and I started talking to women friends of mine and moms and encouraging them to join, I repeatedly heard that I thought the Elks was just a men's drinking club, which it completely is not. And so I decided that at that point, we had a diversity, equity, and inclusion and a belonging issue. And how do I address that? And so the first thing I think when you're looking at deciding if you want to adopt a diversity, equity, and inclusion belonging statement is you got to look around the room and identify who's your audience and what's your mission statement? What are you trying to accomplish? What's your goals and your objectives? My goals and objectives with that was to dispel the myth that the Elks was a men's only drinking club. Number one, it's not men's only. Number two, it's not just a drinking club. The drinking club, it should be a member benefit, but the organization is built on charity, justice, brotherly love, and fidelity. That's its 4 cornerstone points. And a lot of those 4 cornerstones have a lot to do with DEIB. And so I also had to look around the room and realize that the Elks is an older organization. A lot of their members are a generation or 2 above myself. And so I'm really talking to either my parents or my grandparents' generation. And they don't understand what DEIB is. So what I did is I then went to the Grand Lodge statutes and their policy statements, and they had a great policy statement on discrimination. And I basically then used that discrimination policy and I integrated it into a diversity statement that I wrote so that I could then sell it to the older generation of Elks. This is your policy. I'm just expanding upon it so that we can then advertise to a greater group of people that we all, at least us at Denver 17, wanted to advertise to, that we're open to all. And that was our mission statement, that we are open to all. The main components of the Elks is we don't talk about religion. We don't talk about politics in the lodge. So it's supposed to be a free space for all to come and be a safe zone, free of those issues that can really tear us apart, and is looking at differences, not similarities. And so what I've been learning more and more as, you know, now that I've written it and there's so much information out there around DEIB, I would say start with your research. There's so much information out there that's free to your fingertips, and really get a strong footing of what is your mission and who are you trying to communicate your DEIB statement to. And I just went to a seminar on this and they broke it down really easy. Diversity is a fact. We are all diverse. We're diverse in race, we're diverse in religion, we're diverse in financial background, we're diverse in social dynamics, geography. So diversity is in everyday life. Equity is a choice. And it's not about everyone being equal. It's recognizing that we're not all equal. And you make a decision as an organization that you're going to try to fashion your mission statement that it's equitable to all. Inclusion is an action. And so once you identify what your mission is and your goals and objection, then inclusion is the action you take to bring everybody in and communicate that you're open to all. And belonging is the outcome. And I was actually at a seminar today where they said, if you do it right and you build the committee correctly and you have a strong foundation from the top down, which is extremely important, then the diversity is actually the outcome, and it creates itself. And then it's continues from there. So where do you start? Where we started was we really strongly identified that we wanted to dispel like we're an all men's white drinking club. Part of that had to do, we had to go back to our history of the Elks, that for a long time, it was an all men's white organization. And it wasn't till 1994, as a result of some lawsuits brought by women, that women were allowed to join. And similarly with other minority groups about the same time. And I think you need to, when you have those issues that you identify as to why any organization or any group needs to improve on its DEIB, you have to address your history that may have created where you are today. And then once you identify those history issues, be open to talk about them. Any good DEIB committee has to be able to tackle difficult conversations that aren't easy to talk about. But that's the entire mission of that committee, is talk about difficult issues, bring them out in the open. The more you can talk about it, the more you can be open about it, then the more that you start dispelling the differences and you start concentrating on our similarities. I would really focus on finding someone in your organization from leadership that can champion your mission and your objections with DEIB. That individual, you'll find them and they'll be extremely passionate about it. And that's kind of where I was. This was a lot of self-driven because I wanted to belong to something with the Elks that had great foundations of charity, justice, brotherly love, fidelity. All those things are foundations of DEIB, but we needed to better message that and communicate it out. And since I did that and wrote it up and we adopted it at Denver 17, I was extremely encouraged that the state Colorado Elks Association in their bylaws also adopted the diversity statement that I wrote, because they found it to be principled in what they've always believed in and push it out to all their Elks. I would also emphasize that you need to educate yourself on where your organization is in this, and don't get bogged down to trying to tackle all the issues at once. Just keep moving forward. No one has it right yet. There's a lot of free information out there. There's a lot of seminars that are going out, and tackle the low-hanging fruit. For instance, with us, just by us writing the diversity statement, communicating it out to our membership and the public at large, then we, as a result of that, we got the write-up in the Westward article. Then from there, our membership started growing exponentially, with the majority of the people communicating to us that they were joining our Elks because of our diversity statement. We had Elks transferring from other lodges to our lodge, telling me personally that this is what they had been looking for. This is the home that they wanted. And it made me feel extremely proud of what we were doing, but at the same time, realizing that you still need to look in the mirror. You still need to take measure of what is our, where are we at with diversity, and keep moving forward, keep identifying how you can improve upon that, and never stop. But also don't get bogged down that just because you're moving slowly with it doesn't mean that you're not succeeding. And that I think comes into, in order to have a good DIB committee, you have to have measures of success. And that can be taking membership polls of where do they feel we are at, where do they feel that they would like to get to, and then how are you measuring those benchmarks of when you get there. I would also emphasize prioritizing those things. If you prioritize the mission of your DIB committee, then that becomes easier to measure. So prioritize it, set objectives and goals. For instance, with Denver 17, I track how many men to women are we bringing in, how many minorities are being brought in, what impact are we having outside of the Northwest Denver community? Are we bringing in other communities? Are we bringing in members from Southeast Denver? Because the Denver Lodge is the only lodge in the city and county of Denver. And so for us, we were very centric with Northwest Denver membership because that's where the majority, that's where I live. That's where the majority of my friends who joined when I joined came from. But then, we wanted to grow that out. And so we start measuring where are our new membership coming from and how are we, impacting that to make sure that we keep, moving forward. Some other things that I would do is tailor your message to your audience. So my audience was twofold. I had the older membership that I was trying to tailor the message to as to why do we, I would get a lot like, why do we need to have a diversity statement? Why do we need to communicate this out? We've always been open to everyone. Why do we need to say it? A lot of older organizations, they had the thought process that we do good through our good works. We don't need to advertise it. That's just not true in today's day and age. If you want to grow, if you want to bring in new membership, if you want to communicate the good things that you're doing, you have to actually advertise that to people so that they can see what you're doing. They can ask you about it. And from there, they can tell their friends, their families, the good things that we're doing, and then they can be invited in as a guest and decide on their own if this is something that they want to be a part of. But at the same time, I always think it's very important that we don't try to make everyone a member. It's not going to be for some people, and that's okay too, but always make them feel welcome that you don't have to join. It's not a hard pitch. If you want to be our guest, you can always just be our guest. And I would like everyone to understand that, that's okay too. From there, why don't I be quiet for a minute? Sometimes when I get a roll, I don't pause. So if you have questions there, I'd like to stop and see if it's a good time.
Yeah, I mean, this is great. And I appreciate it, Jim. And Lamone, if you have any questions too. I guess, so a couple of questions that I had that popped up as you were talking. One is, let's see here. What specifically did you do to move from the, addressing your history? So we've had, I think, INC as an organization, and other RNOs as well. We've had these conversations before. And, INC's a 45-year-old organization. And so, I just had lunch with one of the founders yesterday and was talking to him about how we're having this diversity discussion on coming up. And he goes, yeah, we've tried to do that. We've actually done that, several times in the past. And I feel like, every time I bring a different thing up that somebody is like, yeah, we've tried that before. But how do you move from that initial conversation and addressing those issues, which are very important, to the action? And how do you move that in a direction? And what are the ways that you took that initial conversation and didn't just let it die, or didn't just let it kind of put it on the shelf and say, yeah, this is the conversation, we have had these issues in the past, but turn that into a kind of a working framework on moving forward as a group?
I would say you got to find your champion. Like, who is your person in your organization that feels extremely passionate about your diversity and building upon it, and then letting them form the committee. Don't get bogged down that your committee may not have the diversity that you want, right? Because that's the benchmark, that's the outcome. I think I would get a little bit of flack or questioning of like, okay, like, you are a middle-class white guy in an organization that has a historical middle-class white guy history, and you're trying to champion the diversity. And you know what? I'm like, yeah, 100%, that's me. And I am going to do it, and I'm going to keep doing it. And I'm not going to be deterred because of what other people's preconceived notions of me are, or what I don't know. 100%, I will admit that I'm a lawyer that doesn't deal with this on my day-to-day life. But this is my day-to-day life. That's just something that's been very passionate to me for a long time. And when I'm going to join an organization that I feel needs to move the needle quite a bit, I can't feel comfortable if I don't do something about it. And so the way that I took it was, I decided I'm tired of hearing when I try to get a member who's either a minority or a woman, and they say, well, I thought that was a white men's drinking club. I took extreme offense to that, because I don't want to belong to an organization that's seen that way. But I can either quit it, or I can try to be an object of change to say, okay, I can understand why you see it that way. I'm listening to you, but we don't want to be seen that way. We are not that way. And so will you work with me to help change it? And you don't even have to join and become a member if you're not comfortable with it right now, but tell me what I could do to entice you to maybe become a member in the future. And a lot of that was someone, it was actually the Westward article when the reporter came out and was interviewing us. And she said, I've looked at your website, I've read your diversity statement. I think that's great, but your website doesn't address any of the history of when minorities and women weren't allowed to join. And I said, you're 100% right. And within about 48 hours, my wife went in and completely drafted up a page that addressed those issues that we had in our past, so that we were identifying issues that were brought to us, addressing it, and communicating out to people that you're right. We have had these issues in the past. We're aware of them. We're not going to allow it to happen in the future. And we want to make sure that everyone in the community feels comfortable that they could come into our establishment as a guest, and hopefully they would see the good works that we're doing in our community and our charity and, you know, food insecurity and veteran affairs, Colorado Special Olympics, or any. We try to communicate to our members that if you have something you're passionate about, bring it to us. And as long as it fits within our current cardinal virtues, which is charity, justice, brotherly love, and fidelity, which is about brotherly love, is about all of us being a part of each other and our community. And how do we pull each other up by our bootstraps together? And so with that, we identified history and issues we've had in the past. And then my job was then to communicate to our membership to say, look, we have to communicate this out. We have to tell people what we are about, or no one will know. And from there, it's just kind of like snowballed, and it's become something much bigger than I ever thought it would, but I'm extremely proud of it. And I'm still learning.
Aside from the Westward article, have there been other things that you've used or actions you've taken to bring in a diverse membership, or is it just been all from that Westward article?
I would say it's more word of mouth, and then it's actions. I would hope that when people come in, it's our actions. So, for example, if someone walks into our lodge that's never been there before and they're a guest of a member, I would hope, and I try to do this, and I know several other of our leadership try to do this, is, you know, don't look over your shoulder and be like, who just walked in the door? Go over there, welcome them, thank them for coming, ask them, who brought them in, be willing to explain a little bit of our history, give them a tour of our lodge, answer their questions, tell them what we're all about, and hopefully make them feel extremely welcome from the first time they walked in. A lot of people don't have any exposure to what an Elks organization is. And so they may have preconceived notions before they walk in the door. What I want to do, without knowing what those might be, is I want to dispel them immediately. I want them to just feel that they walked into a place that is like Cheers, and everybody knows your name. And the next time they walk in, they'll be like, I remember that Jim Wolf guy, or I remember, Hyde the bartender, or I remember Chris, the exalted ruler. And, we're all trying to fit in somewhere. And it feels really comfortable when you can go somewhere that you don't feel like everybody already knows each other and you're the outsider and it's, cliquish. You want to go somewhere where, wow, you walk through the door, and whether you know someone or not, someone will walk over to you, welcome you, say, come over, sit down with us, introduce you to 3 or 4 people you've never met before. And then next thing you know, you actually realize not everybody there does know each other. It just feels that way.
That's great. Lamone, do you have any questions?
Yeah, my experience with DEI is a little different based upon growing up in Denver when it was segregated, my family getting across the red line, school desegregation, and affirmative action and all of that stuff, okay? And we were lulled into believing that we had overcome the racial disparities until 2020, okay? and we've been upside down ever since. So it's like we're starting all over again. The racial animosity is at an all-time high, much worse than it was back in the 70s when I was getting out of high school. So from your vantage point, now your organization is still primarily white, is that correct?
I would say that's true.
Yeah. So, and then I joined the INC, is still primarily white, upper middle class people. And we're struggling a bit with diversity and putting together a diversity statement, mission, and goals. Okay. So how could we get started? I heard you say some things earlier, but from a general statement, what would you suggest getting started post George Floyd?
I think you got to be willing to have those very difficult conversations that are not easy to have, that you and I could have, from, you know, a white middle-class male to a Black African woman that grew up, both, I'm a native to Denver too, and we probably grew up in very different dynamics, and understanding that, yeah, we thought we had come a long way with racial equality, but maybe we hadn't got as far as we thought we did. Mm-hmm. And where are we at now? And how do we address where we're at now and talk about it? And from there, I think you will start identifying what you're trying to communicate out with your DEIB statement, and who is your audience that you're trying to tell. It sounds like your audience is a greater audience. You have 56 neighborhoods. Being a native of Denver, the 56 neighborhoods are extremely different. Mm-hmm. And I have some really, really close friends of mine that, you know, grew up over in the Park Hill, 5 Points area. And we talk about this stuff. And even though we live, you know, we grew up, let's say 10, 15 miles apart, completely different upbringings and community. And Denver is still very kind of segregated. So if you just consider, my neighborhood was traditionally in Northwest Denver, Italian and then Hispanic most recently. If you go down Federal to Alameda, you have the Asian community. You have the Jewish neighborhoods, you know, in Glendale there. And then you have the Black neighborhoods from Park Hill through Aurora. And it hasn't really changed. I'm 54 years old. I've lived here my whole life. And it hasn't changed that much, right? But we have to be open to talk about that. And then why hasn't it changed? And maybe it doesn't need to change, right? Like, just because you identify that there's, let's say diversity, maybe you call that an issue, it doesn't mean it's a problem. But how do we get our neighborhoods to interact, work with each other? Because we all probably have very similar goals and objectives. So one of the things that I was working on, and I haven't solved it, and I probably haven't done a very good job, and I'm still working on it, right? And that's where I said before, don't get discouraged because you haven't met all your benchmarks. This is a moving target. Like you said, we thought we had come a long way until 2020 with George Floyd. And a lot of these things boiled to the top, which I think is the George Floyd thing was obviously a travesty and horrible, but you always have, I'm an optimist at heart. I tell people say, is your glass half empty or half full? I try to tell people my glass is overflowing, because I try to look at the bright side of everything. And so you can take something horrible like that and hopefully look at, okay, what did these identify as issues and problems with our society? But then how are we going to use that to become better, all of us? And so what I've wanted to do is there's a Blacks Elks organization. It's called I believe, I might not get it exactly right, but it's basically the Improved Benevolent and Protective Order of Elks. Mm-hmm. And it's a Black national organization that formed before Blacks and African Americans were allowed to join the regular Benevolent and Protective Order of Elks. Mm-hmm. And now there's a lot of integration, but that organization still exists. There was one in the 5 Points neighborhood for a long time. And I don't think it exists any longer, but I was trying to find out, how could I reach out to those members or other organizations that may not be Elks organizations, but have very similar missions of community and charity and fundraising for underprivileged. There's a lot of them. Mm-hmm. So one way we could work together is by reaching out, identifying shared objective for a fundraiser. Let's say it was kids in the advocacy program. That's one of the charities that we did this year, that kids that get caught up in the court system during the holidays. I think everyone could agree that that's a very unfortunate situation, and probably come from all the different neighborhoods. So, if we reach out to church groups or Lions clubs or your organization, the Elks Club, and do shared fundraising. And then what does that do? Well, it builds community, right? So then I meet Lamone and we talk about what your organization's about, and I tell you about what the Elks is about. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh, well, we're also working with this organization over here. Oh, so are we. Oh, well, and all of a sudden you start finding we have a lot more similarities than we have differences. And if you can focus on your similarities, you can build upon those always. And you start personalizing the individual, and all the race and the color of your skin and your background and your neighborhood starts fading away. And now I'm just talking to Lamone, and we're just two Denver natives that probably have a ton in common. And I probably would find out that within a 30-minute conversation with you, you and I probably know 10 people that we both know them, because that's how a conversation with natives of Colorado happen. And it starts happening really fast. And then, and then it's just like we're friends. And once you can identify and you can have those similarities and you can call someone your friend, now that's building a greater community.
Got you. I like that. You're absolutely
But I still got a lot of work to do on it.
Yeah, I think we all do. I'm just getting over the shock of 2020. I wasn't expecting the racial animosity to be still prevalent. Not to mention it filtered all the way up to leadership of this country. So I'm still processing that. But in my everyday life, I don't want that to be a major component. So with the DEI committee, that we're establishing, we started out with a consultant who actually was trying to establish where individual board members were in their thought processes. And it was a little heated. So I think probably we need to pick up where we left off to get over that and then get to what you were saying with finding out that we have more in common than not. So that's my goal.
Yeah, I think that's a great goal. But I do think you have to start with those sometimes heated and uncomfortable conversations, right? Because I think some of the feedback that I got when I started this was some white people thought I was calling them racist because I wanted to write up a diversity statement. Why do we need this? And it took hard conversations that I'm not calling you a racist. I'm trying to tell you that if you're not a racist, then be willing to tell people that and be willing to have the hard conversation that someone may question whether you are or not racist. Be willing to back up your positions and also be open-minded enough that maybe you are a little racist. Maybe we are a little, all of us have innate biases from whatever our background was, from whatever our upbringing. But you have to identify if you have those and be willing to address them and change, right? So just for an example, one of the things that I'm learning is the new pronouns. And I was at a conference today where an individual's pronouns are they and them. Okay. And I know this, and I like this person, and I think the world of this individual. But when I was talking to someone else about this individual, I caught myself several times saying she. Well, that's not her pronoun. And I'm not being open-minded when I speak about that individual or identify that individual by something that they don't identify as. I need to be open to that's a weakness that I have to work on. If I speak to you, Lamone, and I say like Blacks and African Americans, you might say, Jim, that's not the proper way to say that. And I need to be open-minded enough to be like, okay, educate me. I would love to listen. I would love to learn. I don't want to do it wrong. We all need to be open-minded enough to have difficult conversations, be educated, and then continue all the time to keep working on it, right? It's a work in progress.
That's correct. That's very correct. Okay, so we'll go back to where we left off. And I like in this case, the top-down approach, because our delegates are our member organizations. And those of us who are on the board are from those organizations. And we have to demonstrate what we want to impart, to build membership, to keep the organization together and to keep it growing. So I like your approach. Appreciate your conversation.
And to kind of address that a little bit, what Keith's question was earlier that I may not have touched on is he indicated that some of the feedback is, oh, we've tried that before, it didn't work. Hey, we got to just keep trying, right? And you got to just keep telling those people that that give you that feedback from leadership of we've tried that, it won't work. hey, what is the loss? What's the hurt if we try again? And the benefit is exponential if we succeed.
Yeah, and just to clarify, that wasn't the point I was exactly trying to make, even though that is what people say a lot is, oh, we've tried this before. But I think what I was trying to say is this cycle happens, and I feel like it happens a lot in organizations. It's not just with DEI, but it is where you have a conversation about a subject, and then you come up with a lot of notes, and you get really good ideas, and then it kind of gets put on the shelf, and something else, not intentionally even, it just takes over. You have a fundraiser to do, or you have something else that comes up. So I guess my question was kind of, how did you make sure that this stayed relevant, and that these ideas became, your internal practice and whatnot? I think you addressed that a little bit with, you have to have a champion, and you have to have somebody that's really taking this and pushing it, and doing that. So what I've noticed, just, to let everybody know, I am an elk, and this is why I asked Jim to come and speak, is Jim, well, first of all, I've watched Jim do this, exactly what he's talking about doing at the club. I've seen him come up to people and welcome them and bring them into the club. So, he is living what he practiced. But I think that I've just been, so impressed with how fast the Elks have grown, and the variety of different folks that are coming in the door there. What are you looking at in terms of the growth that's happened in the last few years? And we were talking about this earlier, that you had 35 people set to become new members this month even.
Well, and I probably should have started with this, right? So all these comments are Jim Wolf's comments. Mm-hmm. And I don't speak for the Benevolent Protective Order of Elks generally, and I don't speak for Denver 17. I speak for me. Mm-hmm. I'm very passionate about what I believe in. I'm going to continue to push what I believe in at both the Denver 17, our state, which I'm a chair of a committee at the state level for our bylaws committee, and push it at the national level. And I've had people ask me if I think we could get a diversity statement in the Grand Lodge statutes. And my answer is yes, I think we can, but I don't think it's going to happen immediately. And the process for that is very legislative, just like it is at our state and national level, right? So you can write an amendment to your bylaws and introduce it, and then membership gets to vote upon it. I don't think that would pass the first time it gets introduced. But to your point, you can't stop because you failed once, right? Like, I'm very active with some things at our state legislature, and bills get introduced year in and year out, and you tweak them, you improve them, you try to lay the foundation with your legislators of why this would be a good thing for your state, and you just keep building momentum, and you don't let your failures stop you. You identify what your roadblocks are. You identify how you can maybe do it better the next time, and you just keep moving forward. And we are not where I would want to be with membership. So we're right at like 550, close to 600 members. We were under 200 members 7 years ago when I joined, but we only had about 12 active members. I would say our active members, and the way I identify that is they go to at least like one event a year. is in the range of 150 to 200 or greater. More and more of our membership are taking advantage of the lodge, are coming, are joining committees, are giving us feedback. So those are benchmarks, those are measures that I would say that Denver 17 is succeeding in its mission. Our mission is to be a greater Denver community organization. That's a benchmark I think we're succeeding on. But are we where I want to be with diversity? Absolutely not. When I go to our lodge, I would say on any given night, it's still primarily white. It's primarily men, although I would say, you know, my wife has joined. More and more of our membership are women. More and more of them are telling me that diversity is important to them. More and more of our membership is indicated to me that they're with the LGBTQ plus community. We've had 3 Pride event things at our lodge to communicate that, you know, we are open to all. But when I look on a day-to-day basis, we're still primarily white. But you gotta just keep working. And one of my favorite Elks transferred from Aurora. She's a Black LGBTQ member, and I make it a goal of mine every time she walks in. She usually comes in with friends, to give her a hug, to welcome her, to tell her thank you for bringing in your friends, and to make sure that she knows that she is always welcome there. Her friends are always welcome there. And sit down with her and let her know, I know we're not there yet, but we're still working on it. And how can I do better? And now I'm starting, it's not just me that's championing it, right? So it becomes infective. And so now I have other people that understand what my mission is, and it's not just my mission, and it's greater than me. And so they go out into their community, or they go out to their schools, and they can say, hey, you should come over to Denver 17. This is what we're doing. This is what we're trying to do. I would love if, Lamone would come visit and can go back to her neighborhood and, say, hey, this is what they're trying to do. And, can we build upon what they're trying to do over there? I don't need everyone to become members of Denver 17. I actually think it's greater if we can do stuff together in a greater good, but it doesn't all have to be like you have to join the Elks or we can't work together. That's not what it's about. I'm just an Elk because I got invited to be an Elk and I thought I could do some good there, but I can also do good with other groups and other organizations. And I would actually think that would be even greater if we could do that.
Yeah, I noted that. I took some notes here, and I mean, I think that's a really important thing is that you talked about earlier, is just trying to work with other groups, and especially groups that don't look like you, and your membership, and figuring out, who are those groups and what kinds of things can you do together, which I think is really important. And I think it's something that, INC as an organization and RNOs as organizations as well could do that, and should be doing that all the time, with the effect that there's so many different groups out there that they're technically community and neighborhood groups, that we can collaborate with on a lot of things. So this is great.
And the nice thing about the Elks was, and that's what my wife first identified, you know, we had been doing a lot of neighborhood fundraising and a lot of shared school fundraising, which, you know, wasn't traditional. You used to fundraise for your specific school, right? And all the schools were siloed and they were all doing it on their own. Well, when we first came into the Northwest Denver schools, you know, they were underperforming, but we made a conscious choice, several of us together as parents, of like, no, we're not going to ship our children to suburb schools that are performing better, because this is our neighborhood. This is where we live. This is where we're going to invest our money, our time, our energy, our objectives to the schools and the administration. And it really just blossomed and bloomed. And it became like, you know, we knew people at the 12 schools that were in the Northwest quadrant, and we're fundraising, you know, as a group. And then, you know, then you start meeting parents at the other schools, and it became truly a community. I felt a lot of people would tell me like, wow, it seems like Northwest Denver is like this really small town in a big city, because we all like knew each other. Well, we kind of took that to the Elks, because what did we never have? We never had a building. We never had a meeting space. All of a sudden, there's this huge lodge right at 26th and Alcott that, for the most part, sits empty all the time. It looked like it was abandoned.
Yeah.
And we took everything we were doing and we just took it to the Elks that had the same cornerstones of that we were trying to do, but it had meeting space. And I think a lot of the other organizations, that's what they don't have. And so that's where partnerships could really work out with fellow not-for-profits and nonprofits, is we have that meeting space. Now, there's always, you know, challenges with that, you know, as well, which you ran into, right? When like you had something scheduled there and then you had to pivot. So there's challenges. We're still trying to work through those challenges. But to me, that was one of the key things, is there's this huge building that sits empty. If it's empty, it's just a building. If it's full, it's an organization. And I don't care about the building. I care about the organization and the community that we're bringing into that for the betterment of all of us.
Great. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's great. Lamone, did you have anything else?
No, I just want to give it a try. You know, you know, I have a better focus. Although I want to incorporate in our DEI practice is community level support as well, because Denver is so diverse, particularly the east side. I would like to incorporate that as well. The schools, landmarks in the community, churches, you know, map the areas so that we can start being more inclusive.
Yeah, I think that's key. You got to get buy-in from everybody to be successful. And I think that was one of the key things that we did, is we started providing the lodge to our local schools for their, you know, after sports season banquets, and for their, you know, at the North play, the drama program after the closing, give it to the kids, let them have an after party. We let soccer clubs come in and, you know, practice there indoors when the weather was bad, or during COVID, it became kind of a safe space to go. I mean, we have big rooms that you could like social distance, but you could still gather. And I think a lot of, that was lost for a community gathering during COVID. And I don't think we've actually recovered from it yet. And so I think that's key, is to get community buy-in. If you can start with the schools and get, family buy-in and get kids there, guess what? Parents follow where the kids go. And so if you can do events that are centric around youth, the parents will start coming, and then you can start slowly delivering your message. One of the things people ask me, like, what does Denver 17 do that's so successful to get people to join? And I said, we don't really talk about the Elks to start with. We just show them it's a good time. If you make it fun, then people will come back. Everybody's looking for a good time when they're giving their time, right? Their equity of time. We're all busy. So whenever we devote any of our equity of time, if you get a benefit of like, this was fun, this was something I could do with my family, this is something I could do with my friends, they will come back. The Elk side of it and the mission and everything that we do can come later. It doesn't have to be a hard sell of like what we're trying to accomplish immediately. If you do a community event, it's not even important that people know necessarily what the Elks is. So for instance, we did several trunk or treats that we, during Halloween, we set up the parking lot and we invited, people to come in and host the kids and stuff. And it was open to the community at large. It wasn't open to just Elk members. So we would have a lot of people that would come there that didn't know what the Elks is. And they may have left not knowing what the Elks is. And that's okay. But guess what? They'll remember it. And then maybe the next time that they see the Elks is hosting some event, they'll be like, you know what? That was really fun. Let's go visit it again. And eventually, what do they always do? Can you tell me a little bit about the Elks? I don't really understand what this is. 100%. Absolutely. Come in our door. Let me tour you around. Let me show you what we're about. Let me tell you what we're about. It's incremental. You don't have to whack them over the head the first time.
Gotcha.
No, I think
just show what you could do, huh?
Yeah, I mean, and just as an example, it took me about a year plus of like continually hearing about the Elks in Northwest Denver at different events I showed up at and people I talked to before, I made an interest in joining. So that's totally accurate. So, well, Jim, I recognize that you're taking some time out of your week to spend with us. We definitely want to invite you back to have some more discussions in the future. And if it's okay with you, the presentation that we're going to have on the 13th, we're probably going to only be able to show about half of this video because of time. But if you're okay with it, we have a YouTube channel. And so if you don't mind, I would just ask that we could post this video to the YouTube channel and reference it. And if people want to watch the whole thing, they're welcome to, because I think there's great information in the whole thing, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm honored that you asked me to speak. I would love to come and visit your organization on another time. And I know I've been told many times that I can overtalk. So I understand.
No, I think it was all great information. And I know that, we have another speaker we're going to do the same thing with this next week because they can't make it. And so we're going to do a video from them. And then Dave Sabatos from the North Star is going to come and chat too. But yeah, we've got about 45 minutes total. But I think this will be great and will be a really good reference for folks to follow up on. And we'll just kind of tag it and I'll send it to you as well. But it'll just be on our YouTube channel. So
That sounds great. Keith, Lamone, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much. Lamone, please be my guest anytime. Come in, visit us. I'd love to sit down with you and talk about these things more. And, you know, let's just continue to move this forward and keep our communities working with each other for the betterment of all of us.
I understand. I appreciate your time and meeting you as well. And we'll see you soon.
That sounds good.